I know some stuff that works and is going to be helpful to people in managing overwhelming emotional distress, coming to grips with what they live with.
Today, we have a special guest on the show, Dr. Robert Bray. Dr. Bray has worked extensively in the field of traumatic stress recovery for over 40 years. From natural disasters to criminal acts to domestic violence, he has impacted families and communities throughout his professional career. He's been training, writing, and developing thought field therapy since 1996. He is also the author of the book Heal Traumatic Stress Now: Complete Recovery with Thought Field Therapy, No Open Wounds. Dr. Bray, welcome to the Functional Nurse Practitioner podcast.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to finally be here. We've been talking about this, trying to set it up for a while. And I love that I get a chance to reach your audience, which is who I want to reach. I want to reach people who are helpers, who are healers, who are struggling in making our world a better place. And that so I hope I can offer some things that will be useful, at least in thinking about ways that you can apply energy psychology to helping yourselves and helping those that you serve. So, yeah, this is good. And I'm going to say it again, which is if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to redirect me. The problem is that I do a 4-day training on thought field therapy. So when you push the go button, I can keep going for a long time. And if I'm
Gotcha.
drifting off or there's another place to go, just feel free to interrupt me and move me along. So,
Awesome. And frankly, we've never talked about anything like this on the show. So,
oh,
friends, we're getting into some highly important topics. Grab a notebook, a pen, and get ready.
right.
But first,
Yes.
Dr. Bray, Bob,
Yes.
as you said, we all have a story,
Ah,
the why behind who we are.
uh-huh.
Before we get into the nitty gritty of today's show, I would love for you to share your story. Like, who
Mm,
are you and
mm,
why should we
mm.
listen to you?
Who am I? Well, you should listen to me because I know some stuff that works and is going to be helpful to people in managing overwhelming emotional distress, coming to grips with what they live with. And I don't know which story to tell you because, where to start. I've not had a lot of, given who you are, I am thinking I should do something in health field, but, I've been very healthy most of my life. And it's not like I came to it because of that. Um, but I can talk to you about addiction, okay? Because that is an important part of my story. That I was using marijuana from practically the day I started college, up until 1996. And that's when I took a training in thought field therapy. And that was the first time that I found myself uh, with something that would work. So I smoked marijuana forever, and I would say I had an underlying anxiety disorder, maybe some trauma that I experienced, but it was all self-medicating for management purposes. Now I was a perfectly functional um, addict in a sense that I wouldn't go to class, I wouldn't go to school when I was high, I wouldn't do that when I started working with people. There was no way that I would try to work with somebody when I was high. So, and I felt pretty in control of it, except I wasn't in control. I mean, that's the thing that makes me know that I clearly addicted. So my definition of addiction is pretty straightforward. It comes out of the Council on Alcoholism, which is the inability to accurately predict how much and when you use. So I would say, well, I'm not going to smoke this week, right? Or I would say I'm only going to have a couple of hits, and never held up. I'd say I'm not going to smoke this week, so I wouldn't smoke on Monday. Tuesday I'd be smoking again, or I would say I'm only going to have a hit, and I'd smoke a joint. And all of that said to me that I was out of control with it, that I couldn't accurately predict when and how much it would use. And even though I was functional enough to get married, to get a Ph.D., it was clearly something that was problematic for me. But somewhere in 1996, so I've been doing this stuff for quite a while, um, a friend of mine showed me some tapping, stimulating meridian treatment points in a specific order. And I thought, that's crazy. I'm not going to do this stuff. And then I tried it, and I was fascinated by the fact that it did have an immediate impact on my experience. And so then I went and took a 4-day training with Dr. Roger Callahan. And he was the one who innovated this, the man who said, look, we can approach this in a different way and put the protocols together. And in that training in 1996, I stopped smoking marijuana. And I didn't have any urge. It was kind of like, oh, I don't need to do this anymore. And so when I realized that this anxiety or this need or desire or discomfort that always drove me back to wanting to get high again was it was gone. Now, once you get rid of that urge to light up, to engage in whatever your addiction is, now it could be marijuana, alcohol, sex, shopping. I mean, whatever we do to self medicate ourselves, we're just trying to take care of ourselves. So I figured out that I could take care of myself simply with some tapping. And so I did the tapping, the urge went away, and it was years before I smoked again. Now I did start a little bit, but it's been probably 2-3 years since I had any, and it's just it complicates my life. I don't need the complication. So that's a story of how I then gained confidence that
Mhm.
what Dr. Callahan was teaching was valuable and important. And that started me down the road of I studied with Dr. Callahan for years. I was I assisted him in training, so many trainings. I did trainings for Callahan techniques for years. So I'm probably the best trained thought field therapist in the world because Dr. Callahan's not around anymore, so nobody's going to get those kind of hours again. I'm going to pause here because this is what I'm saying about I can get started and keep going, but that's how I came to know that this stuff works from my personal experience, and it was the evidence that I needed to say, now how do I use this to help other people? So
Okay. Well, that's thank you for
yeah.
sharing like what you've been through, and I can absolutely appreciate that, and I feel like it's really going to resonate with a lot of individuals. I mean, for starters, simply for me, that
Mm-hmm.
anxiety feeling
Mm-hmm.
and looking for something to make it get better. And you said
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I don't think you used the word retail therapy, but that's what I use.
Oh
It's like
yeah,
if I'm super stressed out and I'm not a shopper.
right,
That's the
right.
thing, I'm not really a shopper,
But it gets you
but
that relief that you
if
need.
I get super anxious, I'm like, "Maybe I need to buy something and I'll feel better."
Well, I,
So
I
that
can I can buy into that. I think it's good, and maybe I can show you some tapping that would help you, be able to manage that a little better. So
yes, I definitely am interested in that, but this whole concept of this
T,
TFT, if I'm
thought
saying that
field
right, thought
therapy. Yes,
field therapy,
yes.
like, could you go, like, a little bit deeper into, like I don't know if most people have heard
Well,
that, like, concept before, like, what exactly is that?
well, it
Are you currently suffering with Hashimoto's? Have you been told there is nothing you can do? Are you tired of the never ending fatigue? Are you ready to overcome the debilitating brain fog, anxiety, joint pain? I created a masterclass where we dive into the underlying root causes of Hashimoto's so we can get you on a different pathway. One that leads to not only improving your symptoms, but transforming your health. For now, I'm offering this masterclass for free because I know how it feels to keep searching for answers and coming up empty handed. If you'd like to gain instant access to this masterclass, comment down below masterclass and I will send you the link. Now, back to today's episode.
it's been around. Doctor, I took the training over 25 years ago, and it's been around. He started developing the concepts in the 80s. And the idea was is that he learned that the body has energy systems that we can access, and he uses the meridian treatment points that is used in acupuncture and acupressure. So even though he doesn't come out of that tradition, that's how we find that we can communicate with the body at the deepest, most fundamental levels to correct misinformation that probably is causing us to have discomfort, or it can be anything from just an anxiety or a feeling to pain to underlying physical conditions also. So there's applications across the board for all things human. And the idea here is that what he found, he started, let me take it. So he started by, he was a psychologist with 50 years experience. And he was exposed to something called kinesiology muscle testing, which a psychiatrist friend of his was showing him. And he loved it, and he thought it was interesting because it was different. And it didn't require that you have words or anything else. You would muscle test, and the body would respond. And that's then made him say, there's something to this. He went and took the 100-hour course in kinesiology that was offered back then in the 70s by a chiropractor, Goodhart. And he was one of the few non-chiropractors to ever take the course. But then he came back and he said, through muscle testing, we can access information that's going on in the person that will then help us understand why they're getting better, why they're not getting better, and what we can do to make that happen. So kinesiology muscle testing, I don't know if your audience has been exposed to it, but it's as simple as hold your arm out, and then you press on the arm and you see how quickly it engages and how strongly it engages. And then based on different states of mind. So you would ask somebody to think about something, or you'd ask somebody to say words, and that triggers activity in a particular thought field. And then the muscles and it's not necessarily muscles, but its whole neurological system engages in a way that you can tell whether it's positive or negative, whether you're strong or weak, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
based on that, then we can gain more evidence about how to correct that problem. So if I say that I want to be over this anxiety, and my arm goes weak, well, I know that's false. The reality is, I know that I want to be over this anxiety. And so, why isn't that I don't have a strong response to that? Well, it may be because I have a condition called psychological reversal, where just the thought of it causes my energy systems to go wonky. And
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Callahan developed treatments for that. So a way to quickly correct it, so that then you could get the test you're looking for. Um, and then he found through experimentation primarily, because he was a psychologist with, you know, uh, as I said, 30, 40 years experience. So he had a clientele that he could work from and people he knew really well. So he started working with them around these ideas. And at some point found that by stimulating meridian treatment points, you create a change in the control mechanism in the information that's flowing through the body. And by that, I mean, so we're tapping on meridian treatment points, and we just use our own fingertips to stimulate it. Now, if I were an acupuncturist, yeah, I could do it with needles, or you can do it with a cold laser, or you could do it just with pressure. But the idea is you're stimulating. These are our standard treatment points, and we test from standard alarm points. But you don't need to be an acupuncturist, and you don't need to study acupuncture to learn this. One of the biggest mistakes I made was like, I thought, oh, it's related to I'll just get a book, right? I'll start studying this stuff. But I'll tell you, very quickly, what I found was is that um, the approach, the Eastern medicine approach to this, is very different than what Dr. Callahan was developing, and not necessary. So don't get yourself confused about I don't know acupuncture, I don't know those kinds of things. The way that he teaches it and the way that it's taught primarily these days, you just need to follow the protocols. So,
Okay.
is that helpful?
It is, and it's you've I'm a forever learner over here. It sounds like you are too, where I'm instantly thinking, "Do I need to go back to school?"
No, 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 no.
'Cause
You,
it sounds it sounds really interesting, but this concept of muscle testing,
yeah,
I do have a lot of, patients and even clients
yeah.
of mine that have had this done by somebody else. Is this something, like, somebody can do on themselves? This I just thought of this
Yeah, yeah,
question, and
yeah.
I'm
No, that's
curious.
a good question, and that's one of the things I teach when I teach it now in this 4-day training is I teach somebody how to self-test. So, for example, now you'll see me as we go along here if I do some treatment or whatever. The way I self-test now is I don't have to push on my arm like this. What I'm doing is I'm engaging a muscle, and I usually just use my finger and so the muscle will be strong or it'll be weak and I can feel it, and so I'm able to know what I'm feeling. So if I say I want to be healthy, well, that's a strong response. If I say I want to be sick, well, that's a weak response because it's not true. In muscle testing, a true statement um, is going to get you a strong response. It adds strength to your system when you speak the truth, when you feel the truth, when you're connected to something that's real for you in that way, you're going to get a response. So I can muscle test myself, and so I often do that. You know, what am I feeling about this interview with Tara here? Is this, am I going to be anxious about it? And so if I think about that I'm about to do it, and I muscle test myself, and I'm not getting strong responses, I know that something is off in me because there's no reason that I shouldn't be excited about doing this and positive. Maybe I have some fear about the last interview because somebody was mean to me or I missed something or whatever. But then I will tap for that feeling and the fact that I'm not testing strong when I think about doing it. And then I'll test strong. So,
Well, that you're speaking my language, because one of the things that I am completely fixated on, like,
yeah,
I feel like it's in a positive way,
yeah,
is being connected to ourselves
yes,
and being present, and I it's very interesting because if I'm being honest, I don't really know very much about, like, muscle testing or tapping. I've obviously heard of it,
hmm,
but I haven't really jumped in that rabbit hole
right,
because if I jump in, I jump all in, right? But I the concept of, like, especially the where you had your
yeah,
hands, because I do something called check-ins, and I
hmm,
teach everybody that works with me,
hmm,
and I usually do it like this. A hand on my heart and a hand on my head and saying, "How do you," like, saying to yourself, "How do I feel in my body?
hmm,
Does anything hurt?" And really, like, listening,
hmm,
but I can see that there's an added it's like up leveled
yeah,
to add in, like, the body's response. Am I
right.
understanding that
Right,
right?
right,
Like,
right.
by
And it's not just the when you say the body, by that I mean all the systems, the neurological systems, the muscle, skeletal, and the spiritual, and the history that we create for ourselves, and our perception of who we are or what reality really is. So there's lots of possibilities with it. And it's like the beauty of this is once you learn how to do the muscle testing, you don't have to figure it all out. You just have to bring the person to a point where they're in touch with it. And then
mm,
the body's own internal healer and wisdom will say, oh, there's a problem here. And we all know how to heal ourselves. And then that will guide us through what is the appropriate tapping procedure in order to do this. Now, there's some standard tapping procedures that don't require muscle testing at all. The most used form of tapping is called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. And they use one tapping pattern for everything. Now, it can be very effective, and I've seen it work lots. And most of the research that's been done around how to use this to heal post traumatic stress is using EFT, which does not require any muscle testing. It just requires that you follow the protocol. And so we have currently over 200 peer-reviewed journal articles written about tapping. It is the most tested therapy for PTSD there is, and the most effective. There's 5 meta-analyses now that say this is the way to really change what people are experiencing who are having PTSD. And there's lots of, and the research keeps growing at experiment. It's just amazing. If you're interested in the research, if you go to energy psychology, or I'm sorry, energy www.energypsych.org. That's the website for the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. Now, that's an organization been around 25 years. I'm on the board of the organization now. But if you go there and then you click on the tab that says research, you'll get the quick fact sheet that'll give you all the information you need to know about it. And if you want, there's a complete bibliography of those 200 articles and probably another 500 pieces that have not been published in that way. So there's lots of research available. It's energypsych.org. And
I'm going to put that information
okay,
in the show notes.
good, good.
And I'm definitely going to check that out because I'm a serious research nerd.
Well, and
Um,
this is the and ASAP, Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, is the place to go if you want to learn more about this stuff. And we've been doing this as an organization. And if you want to give yourself a treat, come to our annual conference that we do every year, and we have keynote speakers from around the world talking about energy and psychology and a different way of operating in this experience, and lots of workshops, lots of trainings. It's a fun place to do. It'll be, I think, the 1st of May next year in Phoenix. So
ooh, I
come
love
and meet,
Phoenix.
yeah, come and meet me, and come and meet all of us, and you will learn lots of things. So a little plug for the
Well,
conference.
I'm very interested. I went to a conference in Phoenix. Well, it was in right outside of Phoenix. It was in Scottsdale this
uh,
year, and I have a cousin that lives in Phoenix,
there you
and I'm
go,
always looking for a reason to go to Arizona.
there you go, there you go.
Yeah. So I would love to get a little bit like even
Okay.
more into like this TFT. Like who is this? Who could this be helpful for? Like who's
Well,
people that are listening with their notebooks, hopefully writing all
okay,
this
if
awesome
you
information down. Like
if
who
you
is
have
this for?
clients or patients who are anxious, it's going to be helpful, because there's some things that TFT is really good at helping people with, and others that are not so. And I'm not a physician, so I don't treat medical conditions, but I've treated a lot of people who have medical conditions. And I start by saying, let's treat you for the psychological aspect of this. So somebody says they have cancer. Okay, just the C word, a lot of anxiety comes up,
Yeah.
a lot of fear that probably is not necessary, but people can feel that anxious, or they don't feel anything. They shut it down. I'm not going to feel it. I'm not going to look at it. And I'm not going back to that doctor's appointment. I remember I had a client, she came to see me because her husband drug her in because she was having a relapse of a cancer she'd had 3 or 4 years before. And she was saying, I'm not having chemotherapy. I'm not doing anything. It was so horrible. I can't do it. And so what he realized was is that she was reasonable in not wanting to address this because the experience had been pretty horrible. But she came in and we treated that as a traumatic experience, the chemotherapy, the treatment. And we were able to tap down that anxiety about that and to be able to say, well, maybe it's worth doing to keep going. So it was very helpful in that sense. And there's lots of help. But anytime somebody is being overwhelmed by their emotion to a point where they're no longer able to engage the top of the brain, the part of the brain that says, what's the data? Can do an analysis,
Yeah.
can do a reasoned process, can come to a plan that makes sense. But that happens in the top of the brain. But when you're overactivated in the bottom of the brain, it's really the midbrain, the bottom of the brain, the body, by these feelings, you can't get there because you're going to do what you need to do to not feel what you're feeling, which smoke marijuana, drink a beer, go shopping. You know,
Hmm.
but there's lots of ways that you can help. So, well, let me give you a taste of this. So, you
Yes,
said that
please.
there's some things that make you anxious enough that you have to shop. You know,
And that's just one of my vices. But yeah,
well, I
you
won't
said,
ask you. See, that's the other beauty
well,
of this stuff. Disclosure is not required. You don't have to tell me the story. You don't have, yeah,
no, but I do feel like it's important for like the listener to know there's no such thing as perfection,
that's
right? And we all like, because I've had people on the show before, and we somehow got we discussed that we were both really nervous,
uh huh,
like coming on,
uh huh,
and I was shocked. They were nervous. They were shocked. I was nervous. But then, like saying maybe to the listener or the viewer, you would never know. But inside, it was like, and so
yeah,
you said some things that could make me feel anxious. If
yes.
well, Bob, I'm going to give you maybe more than you bargained for here.
I'm open.
I would say, if I'm being honest, and this is in the past, I might get red now talking about this, but in the past 5 years, maybe even 4 years, that I have even come to say the word anxiety as a part of my story. I hated the word. It was in my chart, but nobody talked to me about it. And actually, when I saw it in my chart, I became very anxious. And I said, "Why does it say I'm anxious?" And my practitioner was like, "Because you are." And I was very offended
Mm-hmm,
because I had this stigma, the way that I was raised, associated with it.
mm-hmm.
So it's only been for the past 4 or 5 years I've been able to say that I am a person that has had significant anxiety throughout my life, to the point where I would say, I just can't calm down. Like, I remember this as a child, like almost like I would dig my nails in and be like, ah, like
Right, but notice what happened. Just as you pulled up that memory, notice what you felt. Right.
anxiety.
Exactly, and it's because it hasn't been treated. Whatever that
Yeah.
anxiety was that you were there as a child, first I want to say to you, there is no wrong feeling. There is no bad feeling. And I take a very pro symptom position, which says if you have a feeling, it's because there's a reason. And most of us, it's because it's part of our survival mechanism. For example, when you were that child, how old were you?
My earliest memory. I mean,
Okay,
3. I remember 3 years old, and,
right,
like, in the functional medicine space, we use the word triggers, but I'm sure
right,
that we
right.
use that
Yeah,
everywhere, right?
right.
Like, moments in time, but just of, like, neglect. Like, 3 years old stands out to me
Okay, so this
very much
3-year-old
so.
is constantly worried about the fact that she's not going to get what she needs to survive. She's not going to get
Mhm.
attention. She's not going to get care. She's not going to get love. She's not going to get food. She's not going to get a safe place to sleep. So, this three
Yeah.
year old is living in an environment that is full of danger, is full of, and one of the things that anxiety does for us when we're in danger is it stops us. So a 3-year old who can't really cope, doesn't know what to do, gets anxious and then freezes. Okay. And so that was a coping mechanism. Now, I don't know your story that well, but I'll just say it's a pretty common thing, right? So, but I want you to think about that anxious feeling. Think about that 3-year old. And now notice what's happening with your breathing as you think about that. You're triggered into the 3-year old feeling, right? And that feeling's a pretty scary, lonely place. And it's okay to feel it however you feel it, because it it was real. I hope it's not real in your life today, but when you were 3, it was real, right? So let yourself feel it for just a moment. And if you're okay with it, I'm just going to take you through a quick treatment. Now, we start with, first of all, notice the discomfort in your body. And right.
Yes.
Okay. So now, because I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
you, we're
yeah.
going to use a 1 to 10 scale so I can understand. 0 being no discomfort, no anxiety at all. 10 being the worst you can possibly imagine. How would you rate it right now? How would you rate that feeling you're having right now?
At least a 7.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's your device. You calibrate it and use it as you want. So you're a 7. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just to show you in TFT what we do as a standard tapping to begin with, before I even get into the middle, the muscle testing stuff. But tap the side of your hand. Okay, below your pinky finger on the right, and you're good. Now tap under your nose, right on the upper lip. And then I want you to tap the beginning of the eyebrow, between the center line and the face and either eyebrow. Good. And then under the eye, right on the orbital bone there. And then tap under your arm. Go down. With women, we just say where your bra comes across your ribs there, right on your rib there. And then tap under your collarbone. And the best way to find that is go to the notch of your throat, go down an inch and over an inch or so. Yeah, right in there. It's where the clavicle and the first rib and the sternum come together. And then let's tap on the index finger between the last knuckle and the bed of the nail, top of the nail, top of the nail. There you go. And then under collarbone again. And then on the tiny finger under the collarbone. Very good. Um, Okay, so let's just tune back into that. We're not done yet. That's just part of the treatment, but I want you to just check in. Check in with that 3-year-old again and notice what you're feeling now. And how would you rate the distress, the anxiety now, 0 to 10?
A 1.
So it's gone for you. Okay.
It's I could feel it almost
Dissipating?
instantly,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was the moving around. It was not just staying in one space. I'm a very analytical
Right.
person,
Now,
and
the fact, see, that's what convinces me something just happened, because you're putting a lot of energy into figuring out what happened. Now, if you weren't doing that, I would wonder if it was working for you. But because you're trying to figure out what happened, it tells me something happened. And so that's a good thing. Now,
no, something happened because I was just like, "Okay, this is very awkward." So going into it, like, this is I'm on my show,
you were
I'm doing this
being
in front of
very
everybody.
brave. You were being very brave.
But then, like, just concentrating on just that, I wasn't thinking about anything else except for following your instruction, looking at you and making sure I'm doing it right,
Mhm.
and then just feeling it,
Mhm.
that I didn't have I couldn't what is the word? I'm like multitask, that's not
Right,
the right
right,
word, but I can't find it. I couldn't split myself
right,
to, like, hold on to the anxiety feeling that I had, or even try to figure out why it was changing,
right.
and also do the stuff that you were asking me to do.
Because now the what we did by tapping in that order. See, it's not just listening to my voice. It's not just paying attention to me. It's not avoiding the problem. Most people try to explain this by saying, "Well, you were distracting me," by making me do all this tapping and stuff. And I'll point out that it's the worst distraction technique in the world if I ask you to go back and think about it again. So that's not what happened.
Mhm.
And you didn't need to fully understand what was happening. But through that process, you sent a signal that brought you fully into this moment and allowed you to recognize in this moment, what do you got to be anxious about? I mean, you are a highly successful woman who has created a life of value and purpose and are, I hope, recognized and celebrated by a lot of people who value you. Now, that's not the 3-year-old experience. So
No.
if we can get you out of the 3-year-old experience into this one, this isn't such an anxious life.
Mm, mm. It's very I don't get speechless very often. It's very interesting because you said if it was a distraction technique, it
Right.
would be a terrible one because you bring us right
Right,
back to
right,
the moment.
right. Well, we bring
But
you
it
back to
feels
the moment of that memory. See, we're not trying to get rid
Mhm.
of your memories or your experiences. We just want you to have them be memories and not flashback reliving experiences. That's the difference
I
between a trigger and a memory.
I feel like I have to share something because this is really like I'm very fascinated right now. Like I said, I've heard of this. I've never done it. Like I've never done this. I've heard of it and I know people who have done
Yeah.
it and they've had a lot of success. When you said think of a moment,
Hmm.
there's lots of things tied into that 3-year-old's memory, right? But just for if anybody's curious, what the hell was she thinking of? My father took my sister to the circus. Okay, and
Oh,
my dad was not close to us growing up,
uh-huh.
and he's gone now. So it was like an unusual thing,
Hmm.
but I remember that I didn't get to go.
Right.
So I was crying and looking out the window, but it's not so much that as
That
my
represented
dad's
a whole lot
gone.
of things about how you felt your place with your father, with the power in the family.
Yes. And then feeling like, my life was so, like, dysfunctional, I guess you could say, like, the roles with things,
Right.
but then how close I got to my dad,
Hmm.
then we were like this, and then he died. So, when I go back to that memory, I'm not only thinking I didn't get to go to the circus, I'm thinking I lost my dad, right? So, it's all
They're
these
tied
things are tied
together,
in, but
right?
when you brought me back, uh, you if you make me cry, I'm not gonna be happy with you. When you
First of all, I
brought
take
me
no
back.
responsibility for making anybody cry.
Okay, okay.
Okay. And
When you
second
brought
thing
me.
is, don't worry about it. If you cry,
No, that's true, and frankly, I don't. I care, but I don't. I care more about being real.
yeah,
When you brought me back to that moment, I felt like it was different. It was like I remembered the best parts of my relationship with my dad.
yes.
It was so different. Like I wasn't because I remember looking out the window and
Mhm.
seeing them leave and thinking I'm invisible. How come I don't get to go?
Right.
But this time, like I saw how close my dad and I were.
Yeah.
In Even though it didn't happen yet.
Yeah.
Like that's
How old
that's a
was your
very
sister when she went to the circus with him?
she was 5.
See, now that's more appropriate. You take a 5-year-old to the circus, that's a different experience than taking a 3-year-old to the circus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even know why I thought of that memory because when I think about moments in my life that are triggering,
Hmm.
I don't I don't think I've ever talked about that. Maybe like once or twice years ago with my sister, but it was more like, oh, it was annoying. But when you asked me, something just like popped up inside of me. Like, when did this start? I think you said something like that. Like, when did
Right.
this
When do you
begin?
first remember experiencing that feeling? And most of us who have chronic kind of feelings, we can identify the not necessarily the event, but we can usually say, and I say to my clients, how old do you feel when you experience that feeling? How old were you the first time you remember having that feeling? And those are ways that we can go back to those core trauma. Trauma is not necessarily somebody's, coming at you with a knife. Trauma is
Mhm.
that feeling inside of, I'm not safe. I can't survive.
Mhm.
I don't know what to do. And for children, it doesn't take a lot. I mean, they just
No.
have so few uh, intellectual abilities, capacities, and physical strength that it doesn't take much. So when I treat people for chronic conditions, I'm always looking back to when did this begin because it sort of sets a tone for then how we see ourselves. And if you want to change that, you have to
Mm,
go back and heal that a bit.
mm.
Now, a
How we
3-year-old will
see
always feel it. Yeah.
how we see ourselves. Very that's very powerful. And I ask a lot of questions with the people that I work with and
Hmm. Hmm.
going through their whole life, but I've never asked such a targeted question like when is the first time that you experienced this?
Hmm. Hmm.
I feel like if we are in our body and in touch with ourselves, if we're able to be open
Mhm,
about it and honest about it,
mhm.
it's gonna like it hit me. You know, I normally would bring up a different memory,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
but no one's ever asked me like, when did you first experience
Well,
this?
this is part of what's happened for me. You know, when I learned thought field therapy, I learned that I could do things that I didn't think I could do. In a sense that when you're trained in this field in mental health as a social worker, you're trained certain techniques, certain things you can do, and people present things, and then you try these things that have been given to you. But what I love about doing thought field therapy was I was no longer limited by what I had been trained to do. I'm trained in a lot of different psychotherapies and a lot of different approaches. But the beauty of this is I don't worry about what needs to happen because I'm going to engage fearlessly with who's in front of me and not worry about, oh God, am I going to do them some harm? Oh God, they're not going to be happy with me, or this isn't going to work. To just say, let's be present together in this moment, just like we are doing now, and see where our inner healers, our inner wisdom, where it takes us. And through TFT, I'm able to have confidence in that. And so I can sit with you and I can say, well, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm not worried about that it's going to go anywhere bad. I'm not going to leave you in a worse space than I find you. And when you have that kind of confidence about it, you can just keep going and you engage. That's why the 4 day training I do for in San Diego, the title of it is Engaging Fearlessly, because that's really the outcome that I want people to have, whether they're engaging in themselves, contact with themselves, or with others. Do it without fear because you know that there are ways to move through that you don't even
Mm.
know. See, that's the beauty of this. Uh,
Well, and you just said safe space and not going to leave anybody in a worse
Place.
condition, place
Yeah.
emotionally, mentally than when before you started. Is there anyone that this would not be helpful for?
Well, the thing you have to keep in mind is that it's, are they ready for it? Are they open to it? Is it too scary? Is it going to work for them? Now, I, I've worked with people who are schizophrenic, who are actively psychotic. And now, does it cure the psychosis? Sometimes it's very helpful in moving them out of that, but
Mhm.
oftentimes it can be just. I remember I had this one client who came to me and he had this delusional system that the FBI was out to get him and the government was out to get him. And I said, "Well, what makes you think this?" But they're out to get me, but they're not owning it. They're not saying it. And I said, "Well, what makes you think?" He had a backpack full of information letters from the FBI, from everybody you could think of. And they all had the same response, which is, we have no open file on you, except now we have the request file on you. But nobody was caring. And it didn't matter what you said to him, he was not going to be convinced that there weren't people out to get him. Now, that was a delusional system, and it was really debilitating in his life. But we were able to do some tapping. And the first thing that happened amazed me, which was we didn't get rid of the delusional system, but he just said, I don't care. It's kind of like how I feel about the IRS. I know the IRS is out to get me. There's no question in my mind about it. But it really doesn't matter because it's not a problem. So once we got him to a point where he could say, yeah, that's probably true, that they're listening right now, but it doesn't matter. And I said, well, what do we have to do to convince you they're not listening? He said, well, I probably have to tear the walls down to the studs and make sure there's no devices and this and that. And I said, well, that ain't going to happen. So how do we now get to what's underneath this idea that you're not safe? And then that kind of took us down a different road. But again, this is what I mean by engaging fearlessly, because When I said to you, I won't leave you in a bad space, I meant it. Now, I don't know many psychotherapists who can say that with the conviction with which I say it. Because I never promise things I can't deliver. I never promise
Mhm.
things that I know aren't going to be helpful or useful. But I pretty much know that if you're having a bad day, an anxiety or depression or uh, pain, um, you're going to leave in a better way than when you came in. I'm sorry. See, you got me going again here. You pushed the trigger
No,
button. I just,
no, I love it, and you got me thinking because there's so many parts to tapping that make a lot. Because again, I'm a very analytical person. I'm trying to figure it out, right?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
how did I go from I think I said I was like a 7, which
Yes, was the original number.
a 7? What is she talking about? I can be a bit dramatic sometimes, but it's that feeling because it took my breath away for a second because no one's ever asked me that question
Mhm,
before, right? When did you first feel this? I'm like,
mhm.
well, I don't want to go there. Like, it's the first thing I thought of. And I was like, well, whatever. I'll go there and see what happens.
Right.
Um, but I wouldn't have expected it to have such a profound impact
That
with
fast.
just yeah, so fast that it's very interesting because I am definitely the type of practitioner that says this we it everything like we have to this has to be in line in our hearts,
Right.
our minds and our hearts.
Right.
We're not going to be able to do anything if we believe we can't.
Right.
Like, I ask people on a daily basis, do you believe you can heal? And you would not believe the response of no, like I don't believe it that I get. That is and I always say I don't have a magic wand, but if I did, I would wave it where everybody feels hope
Well,
because
yeah, and the difficulty is that if there is a fight between the head and the heart,
Mm,
um, we know who wins, and who wins. The heart will always win. If in
mhm.
your heart you feel something, it doesn't. You're not going to talk yourself out of it. And that's the problem with most traditional psychotherapies is they think we're going to talk ourselves out of what we feel. It doesn't happen. The way that we change what we
Yeah.
feel is by doing something different, by addressing the feeling stuff. And part of that is sometimes it's do something different, you will feel different, right? But it's not
Okay.
that you're going to talk yourself out of it. But the beauty of the tapping is that it allows you to address the feelings in your heart about what you think is important, about what you want, about where you find love. To address that, then you can engage the brain in a way that you can sort things out. But if it's between the head and the heart always wins.
Without a doubt. And it's like somebody saying, just stop it.
Yeah,
Like,
that works.
frankly, like I'm already divulging so much. Sometimes my husband, he'll say something like, well, why are you thinking that? Just stop it. Well, okay, sure. Zzz, it stopped. I mean, it doesn't work like that. And if anything, that gets me more
Oh yeah, because it makes you feel more lonely.
agitated.
Makes you feel more lonely. It's like my wife and I. It's my wife's a master's in social work also, but she's gone into policy development. She's an administrator. She's brilliant in so many ways, but it's like sometimes I just want to come home and talk about what I'm feeling. And she immediately recognizes the distress. She recognizes, and it triggers in her some stuff. And she wants to move to problem solving. Problem solving is a top of the
Mm,
brain activity. And it's like I'm
yes.
going, did I ask you to solve this problem? I just like because then it feels like I have to do something or be different than I am. So we've
If you
come to
just want to
figure this out
feel what
after
you're
50
feeling.
years. You start to figure out how to do these things. But telling people, moving to problem solving before they're ready for that or they're asking for that doesn't work. Doesn't work. It just makes you feel more alone.
Moving to problem solving before you ask for that, before you're ready. I'm going to definitely write that down and I'm going to use that. every chance I get with my husband
Yeah.
because he's a problem solver. Like that's what he does.
Oh
That's
yeah.
his job. Like he puts out fires. He's so good at what he
Yep.
does.
Yep.
And if he even senses anything's going on with me, he's essentially it's like you should try this, you should do this, or what about this, or go do this. And I'm like you, I want to just feel what I'm feeling, and because I want to move through my feelings.
Right.
I
And the
don't want to
reality
bury.
is if you let yourself feel things, it changes. You know, somebody's
Mm,
saying, "Oh, I'm feeling so terrible. I'm going to start crying and I'm never going to stop crying." Well, no, that's not true. It doesn't work like that. If you feel like you need to cry and you let yourself cry, yeah, nobody's died of crying too much. And you will eventually move to a different point with those feelings through the process
mm,
of giving voice to your emotions, giving expression to your emotions. That in itself is very healing, but people won't allow it because they don't trust that if they start crying that they will ever stop, or if they start feeling the rage that they won't kill somebody. The reality is that if we allow our experience and we give expression to it, whether it's a thought or a feeling, that in and of itself is healing and will change. um, but you got to have enough confidence to do that, and that's where the tapping is so handy, because it's like, oh, you're just, you've got rage going on, you're just seeing red, you can't do anything, here, tap with me like this. Oh, okay, now you can step back and get a different perspective on this.
mm.
So um,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that speeds that process of processing your emotional condition.
Yeah, I would have been like, okay, yeah, if you didn't try this on me, and then I saw like the huge difference that it made. I'm gonna have to like watch this and see the order. You said the order is very important for the way
Right.
how you.
Right. And we didn't even get through the whole process. Now, if you want to look at it, if you go to my website, www.rlbray.com, what you're going to find is that there's a tab that says try TFT. If you punch that, it takes you to a YouTube channel of me walking somebody through just what I did with you. And so you can just try it for yourself. Now, there's no counterindications for doing this stuff. Either it works or it does nothing. So it's not going to make things better. Where we run into the problem is when it doesn't work, people keep trying it over and over and over and over again. What you need to do is, if it's not working after a few tries, you need to either need a different tapping pattern, or you need one of the other energetic techniques to prepare yourself to be able to make it work. Um, and but it's all straightforward. I've taught this to children who teach it to other children. We had a mission go to Rwanda, work in an orphanage there, and they were doing some research. But the problem, the research kept getting complicated because they would teach the kids how to do the tapping as part of the research. And then what would happen is if a friend woke up with a nightmare in the middle of the night, the other kids would come around and they would tap with the kid. And so because they knew it worked and they wanted to help. Well, that really screws up your research because now you don't have any control over when and how much and whatever. But
Yeah.
that didn't matter. I mean, the mission was to help these kids, and and it just says how powerful it is and how you can do it. Watching a 10-year-old do this with a 7-year-old is pretty amazing. You know, because they want to help and they can.
Yeah, and I like the concept of doing something. Like you said, maybe we need to even do something different. Like if we're trying something and
Doesn't
it
work.
doesn't work.
Mm.
Although I would, again, the analytical mind that I have, I would question if somebody was was able to be present in their body while doing it. But like you said, maybe they need like a precursor.
Right. And the other part of that is I think part of what the tapping does is it brings us into this present moment, fully into this moment.
Mm.
Because in this moment, you don't strike me as a woman who needs to be anxious about much anything.
I don't.
You don't. You don't strike me as somebody who needs to be. Look, I'm looking at this competent woman who has created a world where she has purpose and meaning, and she's connecting to others who share that and helping them. Uh, that's pretty powerful. That's not a 3 year old. That's a very powerful person who, when she's in touch with her power, is going to be able to say, bring it on. Now, do I ever get scared? Do I know what it's like to be facing a wildfire and say, oh my God, I'm going to die? Well, okay. There's nothing childish about that. That's good common sense. But that doesn't stop me from being able to take care of myself and the people around me.
Yeah, and you've brought up so many things. It's stirring up a lot of things in me because, like I said, I never liked the term anxiety till 4 or 5 years ago. I was even able to say, I guess maybe I have some of this,
You don't want to
but
own it.
feeling like I am much more like at home in my body, and you used a word that really means a lot to me.
What's that?
Present.
Yes.
Present in your body,
Mm.
present, like present.
In the moment.
I'm going to keep saying it because it's I never felt present. I was like disassociated or something growing up. Like I didn't want to be where I was
Right.
a
Or
lot of the times. Although every photo, I've got a huge smile on my face with my pigtails and my big
well, but
smile inside.
that's part of the disassociation is you disconnect from what you're really experiencing. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that because that disassociation is a major survival tool
Yeah.
when you're
It definitely
powerless.
helped me to survive, but
Yes,
then what I realized the older I got, I couldn't like live in the present. Everything was about thinking about the past, which I tried not to do,
right,
or thinking about, well, wait until this day, wait until this happens, wait until Christmas, wait. And like if I was thinking about how I felt, and this is not obviously not the way I feel right
right,
now,
right,
but for years, if I thought about how I felt in the present, it would make me like, they used to say I had ants in my pants. Like
right,
it made me
right.
very
Right, because
uncomfortable.
it triggers you into yeah. The tagline I used for many years was healing the pains of the past and transforming fears of the future into plans of action.
Mm,
And that happens from being fully present in the moment. If you're back in a memory that you're triggered into in a flashback kind of way, looking forward, everything is scary. If you find yourself thinking about the future in a way that is not safe and is not grounded in who you are today, but maybe
mm,
that triggered memory or whatever, you're not going to be able to arrive at what's important to you and do what you want to do. So, that's and I think tapping makes all of that much easier, much faster. And it's not that complicated. So I'm doing a 5 part um, basic thought field therapy training, which we teach the basic algorithms. We don't do any of that. So it's once a week for 2 hours, and you come back 5 times, and I'll teach you the basics of how to use the standard tapping patterns and a couple of other things that sometimes come up in order to be able to help people and to help yourself and to help anybody. And it's open. You don't have to have any special training or anything. And if you go to my website, it's the training that starts in January. I don't know when this is going to show, but I'm putting this out there because I need help reaching people because my trainings are so poorly attended. And I want this is part of, at 73, this is part of where I'm at in my life is that I want this to go forward. And I want people to know it and to use it. So, I'm willing to train anybody anywhere. Money is not the bigger issue for me. The bigger issue is can I get enough bodies together to do the training? So I don't like to put this because this is part of my own stuff. It's like, well, if you're all that hot shit, Bob, why do you need to, beg for a little recognition or to get people to come? And so that's the stuff I
Well,
struggle with.
because you care.
Well, yeah, and I want it to happen, but I mean, this is what I struggle with. I'm psychotherapy, working with individuals one on one. That is like that's the joy of my life, and that's simple and easy for me. Um,
Hmm.
Trying to reach through media a larger audience to do the training stuff. Oh my God. It's like this is different. This is a world that I'm not fully present in, but I'm trying to get there. So anyway, that
Well,
training's coming up. But you don't even need the training. You just need to start tapping.
mm, I'm going to put all of that information below and try to get this up
Uh,
before the new year,
that would
um,
be great.
so
Thank you.
that we can get some. Did you say 73?
Yes.
You're doing something right.
Thank you. Thank you.
The,
I'll take that. I'll take that.
all
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
tapping must really be
Well,
helping.
and I think it does. I think I've lived, especially in the last 25 years, I've had a wonderful life, and I continue to do that. Um, and I think that's the key to health is joy. You know,
Mm,
if
yes.
if there's not any joy going on, you're not really healthy. So
Oh my goodness. Like that's, I think I say this every single day also. Like,
yeah,
where's your joy?
yeah,
I've had so many people push back at me with that and
yeah.
say, they don't even have 5 minutes to breathe.
And then I would say there's something wrong here because breathing is essential. And it's like when somebody comes to me and they say they're depressed, I start by saying my definition of depression, just so you understand how I come about this. Depression is a lack of joy in one's life.
Mm,
So let's not worry too much about what depresses you. Let's see if we can't find a way to bring some joy into your life and then see what happens to the depression.
we need joy every single day. And when
Mhm.
we put ourselves, like, where are we on the priority list?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
don't come to see me if they're feeling good. Unfortunately, like
Right. You're you're
I
sort
see
of the
people when
last
they're at their
stop,
worst.
right? I mean,
Yeah, when they're
yeah.
at their worst, and when I ask, like, "What are you doing for joy?" Because this is definitely something I talk about all the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's, "Well, what do you mean?"
What's that?
Yeah, it's like, "Well, I don't get answers."
Right. Right.
Right? And when I start asking, like, "Well, what, like, fires you up? Like, what do you love to do?" "Well, I don't have time to do any of that."
Well, and
"Well,
I never
you don't have
learned how
time
to
not
do
to,"
it. Yeah.
is what I say. Like,
Yeah.
how important are you? Because we cannot, if our role in life is only to serve others, only to help everybody else and ignore ourselves, how can we give from an empty cup?
Well, yeah, and I think that that's true for some of us. We have different kinds of journeys. Some of it's the hero's journey. Some of it's the healer's journey. But the thing that you have to start with first of all is how do you survive in a way that allows you to give? You
Mm,
know, so that 3-year old of yours, she didn't have time to do anything. She didn't have time for joy because it was too scary. And a lot of times, if a kid lets themselves feel joy, it's setting them up for disappointment. It's setting them up for, um,
yeah. I was the, forever rosy colored glasses, like,
yeah, yeah,
constantly disappointed, but I
yeah,
always believed in the magic
yes,
up until my 30s, I would say, and I'm 50. So
uh-huh,
up until my 30s, I almost like people would almost accuse me of not living in reality and asking, "What are you on?" I
right,
said, "Well, I choose to just I wanna believe that everything is good is going to happen," but then I was constantly there was so much disappointment, and that feeling I feel like disappointment is, for me, the worst feeling.
right. It was easier to blame yourself or easier to say that it was
Yeah.
the circumstances rather than deal with the fact that the reality is that it's not the way you want it to be or need it to be. I mean, I struggle with that in the world today.
Hmm.
Is I look at the world and the wars that are going on and the
Yeah.
politics, and I can't say it's not real. It's very real, and there's a lot of people who are suffering with that. Is that my reality today? Other than being empathetic to that condition, no, that's not my world. But I'm part of that world. And to say, I'm just going to choose to be optimistic, well, no, I'm going to go vote. No, I'm going to try to teach people new things. Yeah. Uh, but you
Well,
got to
I
be able to do that.
I have like loved this, and I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about, but
We
I
can
want
do
to be
more if you
respectful.
want another time.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that because I want to be respectful for your time today, but I feel like we barely tapped the surface. I
Um,
I I I don't have any jokes. Like it's never been my thing. But
But it was a
Bob,
nice attempt.
it,
The tap was a nice attempt. Yes.
I tried,
Yeah.
give me a couple of points or whatever for trying
Right.
and putting myself out there and
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
embarrassed. Bob, is there anything for today, like related to the tapping or just the conversation that we've had today that that we missed that you feel like the listeners would really benefit from?
Well, I hope they come away from this. Look, I work in a world of traumatic stress, post traumatic stress, and post traumatic stress kills people. And
Mm,
it kills people primarily through suicide, not so much through rage, but through suicide. And what I found working with a lot of people over a lot of years is that people are at the highest risk and the most dangerous for highest lethality for suicide when two conditions exist. And those two conditions are a loss of hope and a
mm,
loss of connection. And if anything, I hope people can take away from this idea that there is something else to be done. Have some hope. There is something else to be done. If you think you've tried everything under the sun, well, you haven't done therapy with Bob. So there is something else to be done. So that's the hope piece of it. And also to recognize that even if you can't figure out what it is to be done, if you can stay in connection with somebody, if you've got some love, if you've got some caring or shared or some sense of brotherhood with someone, you know what? That in itself is so powerful because through that connection, you will find that there is something you haven't tried. There is hope. So those two things kind of play hand in hand. And the scary part for me is when somebody is hopeless, there's nothing to be done, and they're isolated. So that's the piece that we need to be paying attention to in the people around us. And I hope you take away from it there is some hope, and you are not alone. There are a lot of people feeling what you felt. Even if they're still not 3 years old, they're still feeling
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that's very powerful and knowing we're never hopeless. I that's my life's mission is to spread that
Yeah.
hopeless with whatever, with our
Yeah.
feelings, with our diseases,
Yeah.
our future, that is something we always have. And like you said, we need community. Like isolation is a risk factor for disease.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I feel like if we're feeling hopeless, if we're feeling diseased, right? Like all of
Right.
the
Right.
amazing people that come
Mhm.
to see me, all of these
Mhm.
physical and emotional issues going on, then we tend to isolate, push people away,
Right.
and just stay inside of our own self. And I did that for quite some
Mhm.
time, and it was dark. Those were it was dark, like
Yeah.
because I am a like who wants to be around me, like gather
Yeah.
everybody up. So when I actually felt myself pushing people away, it was a really big wake up call for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have loved this conversation, Bob. We definitely want to have you come back on the show. What is the best way for anybody to get a hold of you?
just go to my website, rlbray.com, and you can email me through that, or just email me at rlbray at rlbray.com. That's my email. You can certainly do that. And go to the website, take a look at it, take a look at the trainings. If you think you're interested or you have some questions, feel free to reach out to me. And
Definitely everybody listening or watching, go check it out and go watch your free training by clicking the link on your website to watch it on
yeah,
YouTube. I know what I'm doing later. I'm going to be
okay.
doing more of this because I'm can't wait till my husband gets home. I'm going to be like, you're never going to believe this.
He will
Thank
be
you.
so happy. He will be so happy that 3-year-old is not anxious anymore.
I'm going to have to do a little bit more tapping
We will. Yeah.
for that. But thank you so much. This has been very enlightening.
Thank you.